All right, welcome back to another episode. My friend Cameron MacGregor joins us. I'm still a little sick, excuse me. Cameron has joined us a couple times, and we've had some really good conversations about masculinity, economics, about sexuality, the dating market. Today, we want to get into some other issues relating to some geopolitics, a little bit of economics, and Cameron wants to get into the topic of the rise of Masco nationalism. So why don't we start with maybe the video that you recently did? The last video you did was called Winter is Coming, and you talked about the fourth turning, and then you talked about the vacuous nature of the economic system. You've been pretty accurate in the last year or two since I've known you, talking about how the economic system is really just a bunch of it's all vacuum. It's empty. It's basically, fiat. It's all based around debt. It's collapsing. Catch us up on that first. And what do you mean by, first of all, tell us about Fourth Turning, why it matters, that book. And then what is the winter that you think is coming?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on again, Jay. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy your live streams and I read as much of your material as I can. So, as always, thanks for your perspective. It's always been helpful for
Thank
me.
you.
We're living in interesting times, no doubt. And my sense is that the rate of change is beginning to accelerate around the world. So, I did a video recently talking about history in terms of seasons. And that's not a new concept. Most historians that have talked about broader sweeps of history, whether it's Spangler or Toynbee or a guy that I'm going to talk about with you on this show today, Ibn Khaldun, they all talked about civilizations evolving in the grand expanse of time in a kind of cyclical fashion, much like seasonal change. And so in the late 90s, there was a book that addressed many of these themes by, I think, doing a good job of assimilating lots of different influences, Toynbee and Spangler and others, into a very readable, structured book called The Fourth Turning. And The Fourth Turning essentially argues that generations change or evolve in a life cycle. I think he called it a seculum that consists of a pattern. And we are in what he called, or what the authors call, there's a couple of them, Neil Howe, and I always forget the other one. We are in what they call the fourth turning. And the fourth turning is, I think, a 20-year, it's like a 2-decade period of time in which you get the completion of a cycle. And I would tend to agree with that. It's impossible to know where to demarcate these cycles exactly. It's not precise. But they chose the year 2005, which is interesting because that comes just ahead of 2008, a very key pivotal moment in the history of the United States. And that sets the stage for where we are today financially, meaning that the demolition of the financial system really began in 2008 because of leverage. There's just simply too much debt and not enough underlying economic growth underneath it. And there was really no solution in 2008 other than to let the whole system implode and restructure or reset, which we didn't allow, or to permit governments to absorb all of those liabilities on public ledgers, which is what we did. The problem with doing that, of course, is that doesn't eradicate the problem. It just redistributes it. And so that brings us to today, in which all of a sudden we are now beginning to experience, in my view, Jay, the early stages of debt capacity. And while these words or these terms that a lot of these economists and investment analysts use are very esoteric, they're hard to follow in many respects. At the end of the day, there's too much debt in the system and there's not enough growth. And you reach an inflection point in which the debt starts to eat away at the growth itself. In the West, we tend to call that financialization. I think that's a good word to use. But the financial system is growing and growing and growing and growing. And that's best embedded in the federal government itself, right? I mean, one wonders if our revenues aren't growing exponentially, how is government spending growing exponentially? Well, that's because of the financial system. The financial system compensates for a lack of revenue, lack of real growth to sustain it. So we're at a critical stage of imbalance, and interest rates are rising. And they're rising not just because the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the U.S., is is increasing them to deal with inflation. They're rising because the debts in the system are beginning to roll over. And that means that the cost of capital goes up. It means that banks, households, governments are beginning to tighten their budgets to weather the storm. And that storm is this wintry hardship, this age of scarcity, as I call it, in which everybody buckles down to sort of survive this collapse of the financial system. And we're in the early stages of that, it appears.
Yeah, we already saw the rumblings of this, like you said, 2008 with the housing collapse, and then we had in just post-COVID, right? We have a bunch of banks collapsing, Silicon Valley Bank. We have all these tremors in the crypto arena of these frauds and basically Democrat Party money laundering operations like FTX. All that collapsing, and yet Bitcoin and yet crypto is still here, still running strong. I mean, Bitcoin is up 140% in the last year. So, I was actually really impressed with a lot of your breakdowns that you do. You kind of do these in-depth slides where you do periodic updates to the market. You do a lot of traveling, a lot of research, and you were pretty spot on. And you were talking about how, look for in the coming months with a lot of these traditional TradFi places going out of business and collapsing. Look for the rise in crypto. It may not be immediate. It might be in the near future, but I used that time to accumulate in the last year, and here we are with 140% returns. I've believed in Bitcoin since 2017. You did a great video the other day, a couple weeks ago. The Bitcoin's time is now. I know that the crypto market is still small compared to, the rest of the markets, even the gold market. But we're beginning to see with what looks like will be approval of ETFs for Bitcoin, BlackRock, and others. Of course, this is sort of a double-edged sword, because my suspicion is that BlackRock is interested in Bitcoin, not just because of its fundamentals and its store of value and all that, but also perhaps to try to control it. I think maybe they want to get in because they think, oh crap, maybe this is the future. We've got to get in here early and try to steer this into some sort of manipulation tool. What do you think about all that? Tell us about what your ideas on Bitcoin. I liked your video. And do you think we're at this point where it really is Bitcoin's time? Will it be another cycle before we start to see that? And is BlackRock really moving into this to control it?
Yeah, so let's just say at the outset, because when it comes to Bitcoin, there's so much emphasis on the price in fiat, and prices are erratic. Obviously, over the last decade, Bitcoin's performance has been meteoric, and that in of itself is tremendous. The question is, what is Bitcoin? And that's, I think, where we need to really orient ourselves. Bitcoin emerged out of the cypherpunk movement, which was centered in San Francisco in the 90s. And at that time, cryptography was beginning to gain momentum. Now, people like Hal Finney, many of whom think Hal Finney is Satoshi, Len Sassaman's another. These were cutting-edge thinkers experimenting with cryptocurrency, and their view was
it's actually Michio Kaku is Satoshi. Do you know that?
Is he? No,
I
didn't
joking.
know that.
I'm being silly. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it could be. I mean, it's
not. I guarantee
unknown today, right?
It's not. It's not him any more than it is Carl Sagan. I'm just being silly.
I do like watching his videos, but in any case, I'm sure at some point he may claim that he's the author. You never know. But in any case, the cypherpunk movement should be credited with advanced insight into the collapse of the financial system. In other words, they recognized early on that the financial system, like the information age itself, posed an existential threat to privacy, to individual autonomy. And that was really their main concern. Now, of course, fast forward to 2008, you get this collapse, which appears to destroy the entire fiat currency system. And that's when you get the white paper that comes out. And so that brings us to what Bitcoin is. It's a turnkey monetary system. It's not a speculative asset. It's not a store of value. It may become those things. It may serve multiple purposes, but at its core, it is an alternative monetary system. Why did they divine to create such a thing? Well, because they believe that the collapse of the financial system was imminent, as we do today. Now, these things always take longer than one might expect. It's just the nature of history that way. But that is effectively what Bitcoin is. And so what's happening globally, not just in the United States and not just amongst major investment corporations like BlackRock, I think, is that there's a recognition of two things. One is that Bitcoin is not simply an interesting speculative bubble or mania. Second, that there are real problems in the financial system, especially in the banks. And so I fully expect the demolition of the financial system to reignite next year. Why do I say that? Well, because of unrealized losses, because of higher interest rates, because there are these things called the euro-dollar market, which is about $93 trillion in size. And those are US dollar denominated lending that's done offshore, okay? There's also the Asian euro-dollar market. In other words, it's not just the United States. It's not just the strength or weakness of US banks or the systemically important financial institutions. It's that the entire system is a doomsday machine that I believe has gone off. And so as that doomsday machine begins to demolition, or you might say the explosion begins to spread beyond the regional banks, into commercial real estate, into the SIFIs, into U.S. Treasury bonds, so forth and so on, you're going to see more and more and more capital, institutions, foreigners, potentially you might see Latin American countries beyond El Salvador. I think Argentina is a prime candidate. They're talking about, pegging to the dollar or using the dollar instead of the peso. But I think they're going to figure out pretty fast that's probably not a good idea. Bitcoin is better. So the whole world is moving in this direction, but it's going to be the countries in Latin America. It's going to be the countries in Africa. And in the United States, it's going to be, you might say, the more enlightened institutions or folks that are well-versed in how fragile the existing system is that pushes Bitcoin into that next market capitalization upward. Are we there yet? I'm not convinced that we are. I think that Bitcoin is still very much in a range. I don't think it's broken out yet, but it's poised to do so. So for your audience and others that are curious about what to do, I've emphasized a two-tier approach or a two-pivot approach. Recognize that the legacy financial system is crumbling, but it hasn't blown up fully yet.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that Bitcoin is part of the solution. So you want to pivot slowly away from the legacy financial system and slowly into the new financial system, which I believe is going to be Bitcoin and potentially other cryptocurrencies, including Ethereum, which I think is likely going to serve the role of the decentralized financial landscape. We'll see if that turns out, but I think that's very likely.
Yeah, I mean, I had similar ideas, and then we saw a lot of, potential censorship with Ethereum. So I have doubts about Ethereum. I think people will make money on Ethereum, and it might have a lot of use cases for sure. But I'm less less certain on Ethereum than I used to be. But anyway, I think for sure, with Bitcoin, we're going to see huge, just short-term gains in, given that the halving is coming up next year, and if ETFs are approved, this gives the boomers exposure. Boomers are the wealthiest generation.
Chad Mode is your ultimate natural pre-workout, designed to take your performance to the next level. Chad Mode is for natty beast alphas only. Whether you're hitting the gym, invading a favela, conquering a small village, gambling, burning the midnight oil, mogging on your coworkers, or getting banned from Facebook, Chad Mode gives you the competitive edge you need. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet, organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Only soy boys and betas guzzle blue dye and sucralose, further tanking their already low testosterone levels. Chad Mode is made in America. Unlike your common TikTok peasant's pre-workout powder, it does not contain Chinese lab-made caffeine and artificial sweeteners that soy boys so often crave. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode with Blue Magic registered trademark organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract. Each dose of Chad Mode mirrors the caffeine kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and mog on anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will give you a dominant and aggressive edge, like a lion hunting a gazelle where the gazelle is a TikTok gym zoomer macro guzzling sucralose on the daily, edging to TNF videos. Whether you're seeking a high-potency, junk-free pre-workout or a better way to kickstart your day, Chad Mode has you covered. It's not just for men. Chad Mode is a solution for anyone ready to conquer their fitness and life goals, dominate their coworkers, and aggressively gamble their life savings. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad Mode on TikTok Shop with a limited-time massive discount. Elevate your workouts and supercharge your days. Chad Mode. Not for your average gym bro zoomer who guzzles synthetic blue dyes on the daily. Buy on the TikTok Shop now with a massive discount provided by TikTok for a very limited time. Buy now while this is still available. Chad Mode has been flying off the shelves because it's the first of its kind. Certified for alpha or sigma males only. Do not buy if you are a beta. We will refund your money.
In the history of the world, right? And this gives them exposure to this new asset. And I really like that you pointed out that this isn't really ultimately about speculating in the short term and making money. That might be what happens to people, but that's not what Bitcoin is, right? It's like, it's not this this new kind of internet stock where you speculate on it and make a bunch of money and then get out of it. In the long term, it is the future of money. It is the future of finance because, like you said, it's really this miraculous genius invention that is there to solve a lot of the traditional problems that civilizations and nations have had with money. And one of those problems is, as you know, to give the power of printing the money to some centralized bank or some private entity, which then can then run it up into infinity. And that's unfortunately what's happening with the dollar, especially since it's moved off of any being pegged to anything hard other than other than just pure fiat and faith. And so we need something better than that. We need it based on math. We need it based on actual objective value. So I'm curious what you think about, because there's so much talk about BlackRock ETF. We didn't get to that. Do you think that that's an attempt to try to subvert it? I think that even if that's where it's going long term, hopefully they won't be able to really do that. But it's at least going to make surely the price kind of explode in the short term. Don't you think?
It could. Well, I mean, to some degree, it already has. One wonders if this is a buy the rumor, sell the news event. That is certainly within the realm of possibility. In fact, I think that's very likely that you could see a sell-off next year. The other short-term concern, I'll get to BlackRock in just a moment. The other short-term concern is that the underlying infrastructure of Bitcoin, in terms of the investors, the holders of it, something like 70% of them are long-term holders, or at least they've owned Bitcoin for a year or more. Now, that's a very good thing, as long as those long-term holders aren't margin called or they're not liquidated in other manners such that they would have to sell their Bitcoin. Now, could something like that happen? Yeah, I think it's possible that it could. And if that happens, then you could see Bitcoin retrench or retrace its gains. It's hard to say, right? I don't really know who those long-term holders are, but I do think it's important to be cautious because we're at the early stages of this, and financial assets right now are very murky. You know, just as an aside, everybody on Wall Street today is very bearish on oil. Oil prices have come down over the last several months, despite various efforts by OPEC and big players in the oil industry to put a floor underneath it. All that being said, the fundamentals for oil are excellent. Okay, so at any given time, prices can do whatever they're going to do. The same thing applies to Bitcoin. The fundamentals in support of Bitcoin are strong. And they're strong because the banking system is a mess, because governments are bankrupt, so forth and so on. That being said, the price can still move lower. So just bear that in mind. Regarding BlackRock, BlackRock is a very powerful institution, no doubt. That Larry Fink has outsized influence in countries like France. He's been to Ukraine. There's no question that it is a menace in many respects. It has a subversive influence, not just in financial markets, but well beyond that. Your audience and channel is well versed in that. I don't need to go into it. But given Bitcoin's structure, as you alluded to earlier, I don't think there is much that can be done to manipulate Bitcoin itself, or at least you might say the blockchain of Bitcoin. The danger.
Oh, I meant the
Bitcoin,
price. I meant like dumping and
Oh yeah. The danger of Bitcoin is somewhat similar to what has happened to gold, and that is that there's gold and the fundamentals that drive gold's supply and demand,
right?
And then there's the paper market,
Yeah,
the abstraction, and so you potentially could see something similar like that with Bitcoin. In other words, Bitcoin spawns derivatives or abstractions of it
yes,
that then blow its price out of proportion, shrink it, so forth and so on. It's trickier to do that. And if Bitcoin becomes what we think it will, which is, you might say, the fundamental base money to transact and to store value, that may mitigate that risk. But does that risk exist? Yes. And that means that BlackRock could meddle with the price and could acquire a substantial amount of it. But I still think, given the decentralized structure of it, I don't think it's going to be able to compromise the asset. And that speaks to the revolution that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the printing press. It is part of this reformation that I keep talking about. It is cause for tremendous optimism because, unlike 2008, we now have a potential off-ramp. There is a solution to this mess, and Bitcoin, I think, in the West is going to drive that solution forward. The East is going to be very different. We can talk about that in a moment, but certainly in the West, Latin America, Africa, a lot of the developing countries, I think Bitcoin is going to become their currency.
yeah. I mean, we got El Salvador. I think other nations are going to soon follow, and maybe that will signal, kind of a domino effect. Now, I don't want to. Maybe we can stay on the topic of economics if you have more to get into, but you did a video, America's Future Destruction or Reconstruction. I'd like to talk about some of that maybe because, again,
Sure.
we're talking about economics, but there's also cultural decline and collapse. But one thing I like about your analysis is that you're not black-pilled. You don't give us just this, oh, it's all over and everything's controlled by one group and we're all going to just lose. You offer a lot of positive information, a lot of positive takes. You did the men's suffering and resurrection. I thought that was a great talk because a lot of guys get really down. But you made the great point in that video that, kind of like Nietzsche says, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Going through these things actually makes us better in the long run. And so it's actually good to go through, we don't have to be sadomasochists or masochists or whatever. We don't have to want to be tortured or whatever. Life's going to bring enough pain and torture to make you strong. But going through these things actually does toughen us up. So do you want to shift into that, or do you want to stay a little bit on economic topics before we go there?
No, we can certainly talk about America's position. Look, I am optimistic by the black pill standards. And I often muse about this because the black pillars, as I'm sure you know, Jay, tend to be the most informed. They tend to be the most engaged.
Right.
And they have an abundance of facts and knowledge and insight. And they should be credited with that. And let's just be very clear. Nobody knows how these things are really going to unfold. They could be right, okay? But I don't think so. And one thing I should point out is part of the reason I don't think so, Jay, is because I have met or worked with or spent time with a lot of these globalist-like figures. And I'm going to give you a couple examples right now. And this is not an effort to name drop as much as it is just to say, look, I've been around these folks, okay? They're not as savvy as you might think. A lot of them have consumed their own product, which speaks to the danger of the situation that we're in. When I was at the Naval Academy, I took a class with Robert Kaplan. So Robert Kaplan wrote Warrior Politics. He wrote The Coming Anarchy. He wrote a lot of very bizarre books. Balkan Ghost is probably his most famous. Robert Kaplan didn't know anything about the military. at all. He was largely clueless about the institution. His concept of international affairs, I think, has been thoroughly refuted over the last decade or so. Many of the predictions that he forecasts have not come to bear. Another one, Fred Kagan. Fred Kagan runs the Institute of the Study of War, I think is what it's called. He and his wife, they predicted that the Russians would lose in Ukraine. He was wrong. He doesn't know much about the military or foreign affairs either. These are people that have an agenda. Now, you could say that maybe it's a facade. Maybe they're pretending that they don't really know. And so I don't know. I'll leave that to other folks to speculate. But I have interacted with a lot of these people. And you have to understand that the premise of their worldview is very Marxist. I know you gave a lecture on this the other day. But, from my vantage point, Jay, and you're better versed in the dialectical materialism than I am, no doubt. But at the end of the day, Marxism rests on the foundation that human beings are fungible, that there is no there. There's no spiritual substance or essence with human beings, that they can effectively be molded, changed,
Absolutely,
and remolded however some central authority decides to do so.
Right.
I want to show off something that we're all proud of. I got a browser here. This is Jay Dyer's much vaunted, much sought after Philosophy 101. Now, he just got this page up. We are just testing it out. You guys are some of the first people in the world to see it. I want to say, for my part, it's not Philosophy 101. I think this is a mistitling. I really think of it as like Philosophy Unleashed. Because a Philosophy 101 course, they give you kind of some useless information that you can't make sense of. Jay actually lays out over 12 weeks, dozens and dozens of hours put into just the presentation of this, let alone the hundreds and thousands of hours of research that it takes to have a coherent evolution and history of the origins of philosophy, the uses of philosophy, the different ways to look at it over time, and how that has been brought about to what we have today, which is almost an absence of philosophy on the objective logic and reason side, and an overabundance of woke philosophy that is irrational, is made up day by day as people are like, I think we should bring racism back. And then here's a justification. And then it gets wokeified and spread out. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of communist, socialist ideas where you become the property in action. You need to be able to stand your own ground. It helps to have a foundation in philosophy because it's a method to find truth. When you get down to it, philosophy is there because you love truth enough to go and learn how to find it because it's valuable. So if you're interested in things like that, there is the landing page. We'll link it up in the notes. It is a longer one, so we'll get a shorter URL for this. I'm sure Jay has a link on his page. I just wanted to show it off. Now you know it exists. You can go look for it and see why this is not your father's philosophy, right? So well done. I'm proud of everyone who helped to produce and edit the course. And of course, Jay did a flawless job in presenting the course over those 12 weeks. And he's a juggernaut. He's another guy, just like John Bush, in action all the time, doing something productive, like very little wasted time in his week. Those 168 hours are being harnessed very well.
That's what they believe. And so you can understand why they believe that Washington, D.C., its military power, its diplomatic corps can play God with the fate of nations around the world because of that Marxist core thinking. At the same time, they lack the insight, you might say, of somebody like Lenin. And Lenin is somebody I have studied a great deal because Lenin, I don't know how much of his readings you've perused, Jay, but Lenin had contempt for a lot of the Marxists because he felt that they were these esoteric thinkers that didn't do anything. Right. They didn't take action. They weren't acting in the real world. And so what was Lenin's solution to this? It wasn't propaganda. It wasn't intellectual coercion. It was the gulag. Okay. It was a focus on power. Lenin, one of his famous quotes that I reference all the time is, our fighting strategy is organization. Right. He laid the foundation for a lot of the actions of people like Soros and others, not the Marxists. The Marxists were clueless. And most of their revolutions, especially if you look at the revolutions of 1848 and so forth, right, they failed egregiously.
Yeah, they were failures. Yeah.
They self-destructed, right? Lenin's, on the other hand, and certainly circumstances were very different in his day, but Lenin did lead a successful revolution. I'm sad to say it was a very tragic revolution. But nonetheless, it was successful. because Lenin focused on power and the Marxists focused on ideology. And that's very much the difference, you might say, between a lot of these globalists at the WEF, the folks that work at the ECB, at the European Commission, the folks that are in the US government. They are ideological. They believe that we're in a Manichaean fight between good and evil. And so if we disagree with them, it's because we're evil. It's because we're bad. Right. There isn't a whole lot of intellectual thinking or ammunition behind that view. It's very binary, and frankly, it's intellectually bankrupt. And as a result, their efforts to change the world in their image have completely failed everywhere, including the United States. And so now we're beginning to feel the effects of the damage that they've done. And the population, in my view, and this gets back to your point, is actually waking up. And it's not just in the United States, it's happening all over Europe. That's why you're seeing fulminating movements in the Netherlands. You're seeing it in Slovakia. You're seeing it in France. All over Europe, there is this growing awareness that these people have wrecked the economy. They've flooded these countries with migrants, right. And all the rest of it. And rather than sort of just tipping over and abdicating, which a lot of people have forecast, it seems to me that the opposite is happening. And what's driving that is the demolition of the economy.
Yeah, I just spent 3 weeks in Italy, which is where I got throat AIDS or whatever the hell I've had for the last 6 weeks being sick. And, there's not every city, but several cities that we went to, we spent a lot of time all going throughout the entire country, basically. There were multiple cities where I didn't see any Italians. So this is no joke. Like this is real. And this is basically like on a continual basis, right? I mean, the news pops up every day that, Doctors Without Borders has helped, 5,000 refugees come to another Italian island with a population of 2,000, right? This is in the news like constantly. And it does seem like the sense that I got on the ground was a lot of angst, a lot of anger, and a lot of resentment on the part of the native Italians that they know this is happening. They don't really know what to do, but they are beginning to kind of realize this is happening. So you're right. I think that, and the same thing in America, right? That people are figuring out, hey, wait a minute, seems to be really destructive to to the functioning of the system of the country. So people are waking up, but and I'm not disagreeing. I think your analysis, I'll defer to you on a lot of the analytics and the on the ground analysis, because I'm a bookie nerd kind of guy. I don't get a lot of on the ground analysis, so I'll defer to you on that. My pushback is just this, though. Doesn't it? What about the idea that there are people who do want to tank this country and tank this system? And this is where we kind of, and that's not that I know it all. It's just I can't. To me, it seems like if you wanted to wreck the U.S. and wreck the West, this is the stuff that you would do. Do you? And I totally agree with you. A lot of these people are deluded. They think that they can create and mold man because man's a tabula rasa. He's a blank slate. He's silly putty. We can just mold him into whatever we want. Because they just assume that man doesn't have a soul or a spirit, that there's not an actual person that's there, that's not within their power to dictate and create the communist socialist new man or whatever. But what about the sort of out of control, just sort of delusion maniac, mad scientists, technocrats who think we'll collapse this country and we'll have AI run everything? Now that may be a delusion, I think it is, but what about that kind of a view of the elites that want to? They want to collapse the West and the United States.
Yeah, so I'm glad you made reference to some of the literature that you discuss on your show, because both things can be true. You can have menacing special interests that are driving the ship aground, right? That's absolutely the case. I think that is self-evident. I think it's unassailable, Jay. At the same time, you can also point to the fact that they're incompetent, or at least the mechanisms of government that they now control, they have self-sabotaged, right? And so I think in that sense, I think you can thread that needle. That being said, to your point, the West and potentially the world, and we can get into this in just a moment, the West is in dire straits. We are in a precarious situation. And I try to emphasize that in all my videos. I mean, certainly I think that there is enough, and these are my terms, civilizational vigor to resurrect, to reform, to right the ship. But that's an opinion. It's a speculation. I think there's evidence for it, but we're far from a conclusive moment. I think we're getting closer to which way it's going to go. So I think you're exactly right. And furthermore, I saw evidence for it when I was in the military, right? I saw evidence for it when I was in graduate school. I was a teacher in my 20s. I worked for the public school system. And the effort to poison the well, the effort to subvert, undermine, and destroy the West is systematic. It's institutionalized.
Right.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. My sense, however, is that the host is waking up to the parasite.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, and I think this is very important to note, this is not the first time this has happened. This has occurred again and again and again throughout history. And more often than you might think, the civilizational host wakes up and survives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we will as well. That being said, if we're going to prevail, we're going to need to experience a civilizational catharsis. And I think we're getting closer to that point, but that will not be a Zen moment. It will be a disaster. And my hope is that disaster, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of what that looks like.
I was going to ask you what the scenarios you think they might be.
The question is, can the collateral damage of that disaster be overcome? Now, I think the answer to that is yes, but I could be wrong. The most dangerous threat that we face today is a nuclear confrontation. And the likelihood of a nuclear confrontation is growing by the month. It is a very dangerous time. And it's largely being driven by the people that you referenced a moment ago, people in Washington, D.C. You might say people in vulnerable countries in the Middle East, okay? This war in Ukraine could easily have spiraled out of control. And there were a number of steps to de-escalate that could have been taken, and they were not taken, okay? Second below that, the second tier below that, I should say, is a major war, a major global war. The conditions for that major global war are upon us, right? Ukraine was dangerous enough. Now, these civilizational fault lines, and that's the correct way to look at this. It's not the good and evil that the globalists tell us, as you point out. It's a civilizational conflict. And actually speaking, it's an attempt by civilization on all sides to resurrect itself. In other words, the West isn't driving this train. It's the globalists that are driving this train. Mm-hmm. And in an effort to destroy civilization on both sides, all right? So that's the second danger. And that's beginning to intensify in the Middle East. We can talk about that more in a moment. The third danger is that you experience a kind of financial collapse that is irreparable. Now, my own sense is, and I'm going to release a video on this sometime this month, but my own view, Jay, is almost the antithesis of conventional wisdom. I actually think that a financial collapse will restructure the economy. It will liberate us from this indebted system that's poisoning us. Whereas I think a lot of people think, well, what can we do to forestall it? What can we do to tinker on the margins to fix the system as is? The system as is broken.
Yeah, this system can't be.
It's irreparably broken.
Can't be fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and breaking it is the solution. And this brings us to daylight between, I think, your views or perhaps your sphere and mine, and that is, I think a lot of folks that consume Jay Dyer's content think that their goal is to break it.